race, or if it's so packed that you want to start the races.
I suppose we can wait a minute or two. So we'll go at 3:32.
Oh, so Tim, you know that there's a new participant that is the clicker, and that you can give the clicker control, and then we can give the physical clicker to the person that's in the room.
Yes, I will attempt to do that.
Okay.
I think you just click on the little thing in the bottom left, if I remember it.
You
I
just
don't see
you
it though.
just give the clicker slide control as if it's a real human.
Oh. Oh.
So for me, if I click on the clicker with my left mouse button, there's a plus that says give slide control.
Where's the clicker? I was just looking for it.
The clicker is a participant. It's like a fake human.
Yeah, but oh, I see. Slides clicker. Yep. Last slides control. Yes. I had my participants window closed. That was the problem. And I probably didn't want to do that for my slides. But at least now I know it works. All right. It is 3:32. So thank you for everyone who is here to attend the ACE session. Let's go on to the next slide. It is IETF 122 in Bangkok, of course. The note well, there's a bunch of stuff here that hopefully you're familiar with that you need to familiarize yourself before you participate, including all sorts of process and code of conduct things and patents and copyrights. Please familiarize yourself with the rules before participating. And in particular, the group is much more productive when people treat each other with respect and are polite and professional. So please make sure all of your interactions follow those discussion points and remind yourself of the key highlights that we've highlighted here. And if you ever have any concerns with any of these things, please feel free to talk to me. I don't want people not talking to me because they don't think their issue is important or worth raising. I really am passionate about this sort of stuff. So if there is a problem and you're uncomfortable, please let me know. All right. Our agenda, we have this update from the chairs, and then EST OS core, workflow and parameters, authcred DTLS, ad hoc OS core profile, the group one, and then the pub sub profile. Do we have any agenda bashes? All right, sounds like we're good with the agenda. So we'll move on to draft EST OS core. I'll work on getting the slides up. There you go. And I will pass control to the clicker. So you should have control now. Feel free to go ahead.
Yes, I do. Thank you. So, hello everyone. This is Giovanni Federicheschi, and today I am presenting on behalf of Malisha Vucinic, and he had an urgent personal meeting, so I am covering for him. So I'll talk about protecting ESD payloads with OSCORE. So here is the status of the draft. So version 7 was published just in the beginning of the month. Most of the work was about responding to a very good review from ESCO. So 18 issues were closed and 3 are still open, and that we are going to discuss in this presentation. And also in the end, we will talk about the next steps. So the open issues. So the first one, and also it's the most, where there are more points to discuss, or there are kind of sub issues inside this issue. So first, some context. So RFC 9360 defines COSA headers, which allows sending certificates by reference. So you can do this in two ways, basically, either using a hash as a reference. So for example, X5T for normal certificates, or X5U that you use an URI. And for draft CBOR encoded cert, you can do the same with hashes or URIs for C509 certificates. So that's how you can send a reference. And then ad hoc can use this in ID cred X field so that it doesn't need to transport the whole certificate, just sending the reference. Okay, now then back to this draft, which is ESTO score. So the idea is to support also sending enrollment of certificates by reference so that it can be compatible with other protocols such as ad hoc. So the idea is that the client never needs to see the actual certificates, never needs to transmit or receive the certificate, saving bandwidth and constrained resources. So the server only sends a reference to the client, and the client uses the certificate reference in other communications beyond enrollment, such as ad hoc sessions with other parties or next ad hoc sessions. This will save bandwidth on the constrained link and leaves all the burden to the non-constrained link. So for example, for the server to resolve the certificate reference. And given this context, there are a few sub-issues inside this topic, which I will navigate through them one by one. First one is the interoperability during the enrollment, so between client and server. So there were some discussions during the hackathon this weekend. So one idea, and the idea that popped up, is to use the co-op accept option. So the client can indicate in the accept option the preference for a certain certificate type, certain certificate reference type. And by providing this accept type, we can achieve interoperability. So there are two ways this can be done. So the client may treat the reference as simply an opaque byte string. So that means that the client really doesn't care because it is not going to parse this byte string. So it can be any of the formats, URI, C509, hash, and so on. The other point is if the client needs to parse the reference, then it probably needs to specify into the accept field the specific type of reference that it's asking to be generated. And then how to do this? There are three options that were discussed. First one is it's kind of a hack actually, to define a special semantics in ESTO score that if application CBOR is used in the accept option, then this means any certificate by reference, any type. Second option is to register a new media type, could be in this related draft, COSA CBOR encoded certs, that specifically to tell the server that the client is interested in it accepts any kind of certificate reference. And option 3 is to register new media types for the specific types of certificate references. And the opinion of the author right now is that the options could be combined. So maybe option 2 and option 3 could be used, but the author wants to ask the opinion of the working group on this. Yeah. Francesca.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah.
Does it work? Okay. Yeah, highly dislike option 1. Please don't do that. No. Between option 2 and option 3, I would prefer option 3. It's cleaner. And then that option 3, like those different format can be used, like in accept or anything, some sort of way, like combine or something. But I think maybe 3 is the best, if I understand correctly. But
Yeah,
definitely
and
not 1.
and sorry, what do you think of both having 2 and 3 supported?
I'm not sure that I would like to see a media type review in that case. I'm not sure that that's the right way to use the media type, to say like one media type to specify any of these different formats. Yeah, you usually have one media type map to one format. So yeah.
All right, thank you. So this was this topic about interoperability between client and server. Next topic inside the same issue is interoperability after the enrollment. So also discussions that happened during the hackathon. So that the idea is to facilitate that whatever response is gotten from the server, this can be used in other contexts. For example, in establishing the ad hoc session. For example, as I said before, the ad hoc session has the ID cred X field, so this reference can be used there. So the proposal here is to ensure that it's simple actually. It's just to ensure that whatever reference is returned from the server, it can be used and it's compatible with ID cred credentials by reference used in ad hoc. And this can be is specified in RFC 9528. There's also a small topic about whether the communication peer will support certificates by reference or by value, but this is really another dimension of the discussion. So it could be discussed, for example, in app profiles draft. Next point, different issue now. So considerations about retrieving the certificates by reference. So how to resolve them. So basically, if you have a reference that is a URI, we have a RFC 9360 that specifies a REST API through which the certificate can be obtained using HTTP or CoAP. If the reference is a hash, then that's not so standardized. So basically, there's kind of application specific, and you can assume it, for example, local storage. And of course, the application may use different references with different formats. This can be heterogeneous. It will really depend on application. So the real solution for this is out of scope for this draft, but the authors think that it's still interesting to add a consideration discussing these aspects in the draft. The next issue is the CDDL structure of the certificate signing request attributes endpoint. So context. So the client can send a certificate request attributes request, which is not yet the true request. Is just to learn what attributes the server expects that the client propose during the certificate signing request. And there is some definitions in some standards already, RFC 7030, another draft clarifying that. But there is a discussion ongoing on whether to include specific definitions of the CDDL of the response of this endpoint in the ESTO score or in the draft COSE CBOR encoded certificates. And there is an open issue on CBOR certificates, and Karsten provided input on this. So I don't know if he is around, but thank you for the input so far, and we are looking to continue the discussion. So the proposal is, yeah, really just continue the discussion and eventually merge this in one or the other drafts. And those are the presentations or the updates that I had. And the next steps are to close these open issues and then hopefully go to a working group last call. Thank you. I see Marco on the queue.
Yes, hi Marco. I think it was on slide 6 you mentioned the reference types to be supported by the consumer, the retriever of the certificate. Basically, it's something that can be covered by lake app profiles. Yes, I think it's covered already practically. Some of the information that can be advertised, exchanged to tell what reference types are supported are already part of the menu. So
Perfect.
yes, and it should already be the case, but let's double check.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Marco.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Up next is ACE workflow and params.
Hi everyone, this is Marco. This is an update on the workflow and params document now in version 4 and with a new title, as you can see, which addresses one of the comments, as we'll see. I don't have control yet.
Yeah, it has to be redone each time. My fault.
Yes, thank you. So to recap on what this draft covers at a high level, it's a proposed update to RFC 9200, so the ACE framework. One of the main items in this document is a new workflow for the ACE framework where, unlike the original one, the AS uploads the access token to the RS on behalf of the requesting client. And of course, it's up to the AS to take the final decision, possibly on a per token basis. No ambition to replace in any way the original way to work. We also define a number of new parameters, most of those in the interest of enabling that new workflow, other ones in the interest of really making the issue of an ACE access token workable also when the audience is a group audience. So it includes multiple resource servers. I marked two new items as new because they've come in this version for the first time. One is the revision of the semantics of the already existing ACE profile parameter that Christian suggested, and two additional parameters or ways for C and the AS to coordinate on exchanging authentication credentials of C and RS by value or by reference, avoiding any misunderstanding or even deadlock, as we noted already some months ago. Other things are untouched, at least for this draft. It was a slight amendment on requirements on transfer profiles of the framework and deprecating the original format of error messages that now is supposed to use concise problem details, RFC 9290. Okay, about the updates on this version, thank you, Dave. This slide is because of you, in a good sense. Thanks for this feedback. I think we addressed all your points here. You suggested to give a name to the workflow. I'm not sure this is perfect. I'm not native. It seems like the way in English you refer to, a business pattern where you really go straight from the producer to the consumer. And I really think of farmers and the milk to the direct consumer right away. And here, really, I see the analogy with the token provided directly from DS producing it to the RS being the consumer. You also commented about stressing the advantage of the new workflow for clients not to be presented as not actual ACE clients, but just clueless of details like access tokens. We phrased that in that way, talking of clients not aware of details, such as when we were explaining that part. And you also suggested to get rid of that big chunk about the enforcement of the bidirectional access control with a single access token. There is still an open issue in the repo for this document, I think, but we practically took away all the content and now it lives in a separate new individual submission, and we can keep working and discussing about the topic in that document instead. So thank you very much again. Okay, in section 1, we improved and made more precise the definition of token series that officially is born here and then it started to be considered in different profiles. We were lacking in terms of precise definition, the fact that within a token series, the tokens belong in tweet have in common also the fact that they are all bound to the same POP key and they are issued for the same profile of ACE. That's the definition. Around this topic, in section 3.6, we, I believe, simplified and made also better in terms of practical performance the criterion by which the AES decides the identifiers of this token series and assign those who are starting a new series, as other profiles are practically already using. So the new way, again, I think is simpler and at a very high level abstract way, it's about ensuring the uniqueness that AES for how a token series is identified. Now in terms of a triple, identifier itself, client requesting for the token, and audience for which the token is issued. The slight difference compared to the old triple is that we switched from the authentication credential of C to precisely C as an entity identified over and over by the AES by means of the secure communication channel they use. The new way is simpler for the AES to implement and enforce and avoid ambiguities in a better way that before we were forced to avoid by having for sure the client always including its own credential in every token request, even when requesting a token for updating access rights. That at a close look insane. So now it's even more efficient on the wire. The little price to pay is that there's going to be a slightly quicker consumption of token series ID, but that would happen anyway in a corner case and advanced setups where you have a client asking for tokens for different servers presenting itself with different authentication credentials. So I think the trade-off is really in favor of the new way here. Okay, on the ACE profile parameter, this was about extending its semantics. It was suggested by Christian in a thread of the mailing list at the end of last year. I think what we had already from the ACE framework is limited to having the parameter in the token request, optionally, of course, with the value null. And that's supposed to be followed by the token response, the successful one, of course, specifying as requested by the client the profile that the AES knew better to choose for issuing this access token. This is a bit limited. Still, we don't want a full negotiation, of course, but the extension here is about optionally specifying this profile parameter in the token request with an integer value, where the integer would be one of the already registered integer identifiers of the profile for which the client wants the token issued. For this or other reasons, of course, the issue can fail, and then the AES, as usual, will follow up with an error response. But if things are fine, the AES then follows what the client has requested and will issue the access token for that profile. It doesn't make much sense to repeat that parameter in the response again, of course, but in case the AES sees any reason to do that, well, then that parameter has to exactly echo the same value indicated by the client in the request. Next, that's section 5. It's something we anticipated already at the meeting in Dublin. I think it started to pop up in the ad hoc endoscore profile of ACE that will be presented later today, and also during the presentation of the draft I present after this one. We have enabled for a while the possibility for exchanging authentication credentials of C and RS in the messages exchanged between C and AES, not only by value anymore, but also by reference. You may run into strange situations where references are used, believing things to be stable and the values to be known and well stored, but those may be forgotten. And if the sender insists with using references, you may very much run into a deadlock. So the idea was to try to, of course, avoid that. Signaling something like, please, I forgot, come back to me with the value instead of insisting with the reference. And that had to be solved from two sides. So there were two issues, in fact. The first one was about the AES forgetting about the client authentication credential and having the need to tell the client, please come back to me with your credential by value. And that can simply happen with well, an error response from the AES to C. We didn't have an error code for that. It was just about defining that and registering it in the ACE error namespace. It's a bit trickier in case instead the client forgets the authentication credential of DRS, and DRS instead by default just tend to keep giving the client DRS authentication credential by value. That actual issue here is solved by point A on the solution to. It's essentially about using the RSCNF parameter in the token request with the Boolean value true. The semantics is really, please be sure to give me the credential of the RS for which I'm asking the access token by value. That's what I need, I'm telling you. This means updating formally RFC 9201, where the parameter was defined to be used only in the token responses fact. Here we are saying we can use it also in the request for this reason, with this semantics and this possible value. And again, the issue at hand is solvable by this alone, the value true. We also noted that in general, in other cases, the client may know better than the AS and tell the AS, trust me, I know what I'm doing. Just give me the credential by reference instead. Or don't bother, don't give me anything at all. I know what I'm doing. And that's something that can be signaled instead using different simple values, false or null. Of course, more details are in the draft, but this is the gist really. Yeah, as next steps, we'd like to provide more examples using the latest features I've introduced. So the new error code, the new use of the RSCNF parameter. Well, I think we included already an example of the updated semantics of the ACE profile parameter. We noticed that it would be good, also supported by what's happening in other profiles, to define one new ACE error code. Again, it is still missing for the particular situation where the AS attempts to achieve proof of possession with respect to the client's private key. For whatever reason that fails because unexpected evidence is missing or doesn't recompute quite right on the AS side. It'd be good to follow up with an error response to the client, quite specific with an appropriate error code. So we were thinking to register one. And then we have a few issues and open point in the queue about, I think Christian also recommended that in a GitHub issue, giving clear guidelines on using Anchor CNF, one of the new parameters we've had defined in early version of the drafts already when group audiences are used. And there's some more work to do on detailing how this is used for the dynamic update of access rights, for which we already have some placeholder text around. So that's what we plan for the next revision, at least part of this. Till then, thanks for the comments received already. More welcome, of course. Thank you. That was the last one. Yeah.
Yep. Any questions? Otherwise, let me get the next set of slides up for off-grid DTLS.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there are about 5 steps to this, and my brain is slow at 5 o'clock in the morning.
No worries. Thanks. Here we are. Yeah, this should be even simpler and way more down to earth. Version 1, same title. Okay, let's recap. This is about the DTLS profile of ACE that exists already as RFC 9202. It has an asymmetric and a symmetric mode, but the focus here is the asymmetric mode or RPK mode. The authentication credentials of client and RS are raw public keys and specifically cozy keys. And there was also a follow-up RFC defining how to use TLS instead, but the same applies there, just thinking of TLS instead of DTLS. This is a breakdown of the update proposed by this document as a formal update to RFC 9202. As a breakdown here that we revisit in a later slide, we are extending, first of all, the original RPK mode to support 2 additional formats of authentication credential in that same spirit. One is a CWT claim set transported by value. And the other one, and that's the main point of update of this revision, cozy keys again, but by reference using a standardized confirmation method recently. And then secondly, a brand new mode, the certificate mode, where instead the credentials exchange are certificates X509 or C509 by value or by reference, and you have a lot of flexibility to do combination of value against reference or mode or the other mode, and so on. And the draft was adopted after the Dublin meeting. Thanks a lot for your support. Well, 0.0 followed identical, and the real update is here in version 1. There were some minor editorial improvements, and we had to change the proposed numeric identifier for the new CWT confirmation methods that we have, considering that one was actually registered and we just had to shift everything a few positions forward. I had to put quite some time and carefulness on updating some references, mostly used in the security consideration about the X509 certificates. Some were obsoleted. I had to replace those with the appropriate latest ones, and in the process I found out that there were actually more to refer to in a pool of RFCs that update the original X509 one. So now that pool should be complete and consistent. Okay, more on the technical side, and this is the main point of update I mentioned before, is the new section Q2. So we are talking of the already existing RPK mode, but the new identifier type here is the identification of a raw public key as a COSI key, but by reference, and using the just standardized CWT confirmation method CKT from RFC 9679. So just to very quickly summarize the gist of that structure, you transport the hash of a COSI key or thumbprint computed over a canonical representation, of course, of a COSI key. In this document, we are mandating the use of SHA-256 to compute the hash to avoid messes, complications, or let alone negotiation. Makes sense to me, and it's the mandatory to implement hash algorithm in the RFC that defines the CKT confirmation method. Just felt reasonable. Okay, and of course this plays a role twofold. On one hand, about the authentication credential of the client, the CKT confirmation method would appear about that credential both in the access token request within the CNF parameter placed by the client, and in the CNF claim of the token placed by the AS. And when it comes instead to the authentication credential of the RS, the CKT structure will be, of course, included in the RSCNF parameter of the token response placed by the AS. And in the spirit of combining flexibility, if you go for the RPK mode and for COSI keys, you may have both by value, both by reference, or one by value and one by reference, and so on. It's up to you. This is just an example also already in the draft. The access token request, where the credential of the client is a COSI key expressed here by reference. You look on the right, that public key by reference will be put in the token, omitted for brevity here, and then the credential of the RS will be included also by reference with its thumbprint. Yeah, this is now the updated overview of all the options you would have with this document. The RPK mode will have 3 possibilities: the COSI key by value as original in the DTLS profile, the CCS by value, and the COSI key by reference, what I've just explained. But then you'd also have the certificate mode with the 2 types of certificate that you can transport by value or by reference, and you can do all the combinations you want between client and resource server, value and reference, mode and mode, and so on. Note that we have already registered and usable COSI key and CKT, while all the other key confirmation methods are at the moment requested for registration in another ACE draft, the EDOC underscore profile. So of course we have a normative reference. Yeah, as next steps, I think we have to play with the numbers of the placeholder numeric identifiers again to make it consistent with what we do with that in other profiles. Hopefully it will be the last time for a while at least. I'd like to have at least some informative reference to the workflow and params document I presented before, just to point out that for your information, thanks to what is defined in that document, you can do also that and that in this context. But nothing normative. We need to have security consideration of the validation of the CCS that we forgot to do until now, but a good starting point with minor adaptation should be the security consideration about the same that we have in the ad hoc RFC. And now that we have a bit more modes added in the latest revisions, I think it doesn't hurt to have a few more examples in hybrid settings when you mix up things in the appendix with examples. That's what I have for now, and I don't expect to have more than 1 or 2 more revisions, honestly, before we can consider this complete. But we are not really there yet. Thanks.
All right, great news. Thank you. Any questions for Marco? All right, doesn't look like it.
Thank you all.
All right, so moving on to EdHoc OS Core.
Right. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Rickard Höglund, and I'd like to present some updates to the EdHoc and OS Core profile of ACE. Just as an overview, what this is about, it's about using EdHoc for key establishment, followed by using OS Core for secure communication. And as you can see in this illustration, in fact, in the third message there, within the actual EdHoc execution, the access token is included in an EAD item. And this example also shows the optimization where EdHoc message 3 can be combined with an OS Core request. So in fact, in 2 round trips, in these 4 messages, you can achieve running EdHoc, uploading the access token, and actually accessing a resource on the RS. So what are the main updates we did in version 7? Well, number 1 is we revised the rules for the AS when it comes to assigning session ID values. And Mark also covered this in the workflow and params update. We basically aligned this document with that. So it's no longer about associating this session ID, the identifier of the token series, with the credential of the client, but rather the client as like an identity, because this is more flexible. We also did some updates to the IANA considerations in terms of specifying explicit ranges of the for values of the parameters this document is asking to register. We now also enforce and mention that the AS must do validation of the authentication credential of the client. So basically, well, the AS will retrieve the authentication credential of the clients from the XCNF parameter in the access token request, and it must actually validate that credential. For instance, if it's a certificate, it can verify the signature. And this was just something that was simply not said in previous versions of the document. We also kind of elaborated on the criteria for when the EdHoc info should be included in the access token response. And just for illustrative purposes, on the right-hand side, you can see some of the information that can be included in this EdHoc info. And that's mostly about, well, configuration information for EdHoc, basically. What cipher suite, what method should be used. And we now defined it such that this information must be included if it's about, well, in the access token response for the first access token of a token series. However, it must not be included if it's about an access token for dynamically updating access rights. We also mentioned this kind of idea that you can actually use EdHoc to do kind of a roll call in the case when a group audience is used and the EdHoc reverse message flow is used. So how would this work? Well, basically, the client will send the first co-op post request over IP multicast, serving as an actual EdHoc trigger request. And after that, all the resource servers in this group audience and the resource servers targeted by this multicast request will respond with EdHoc message 1, and followed by that, the client can continue over unicast to send ad hoc message to individually to each RS. So it's kind of a nice optimization that you can do that we now mention in the draft. Another point is being clear that there is a need for the RS to enforce a certain matching of authentication credentials from ID cred X and the EAD item. Just to explain this in a different way, basically, when ad hoc is executed, the credential will be included in the ID cred I or ID cred R field, depending on if this is the reverse or forward ad hoc message flow. So in ID cred X, you will have auth cred C directly or a reference pointing to it. And in the same way, in this new ad hoc ED item, ED access token, where you actually place the value of the access token, or ED session ID, which refers to a session ID that points you to a token series, that will also lead you to find the auth cred C directly or indirectly. And the idea here is that I have these points A and B, and the credentials that are either directly here by value or being referred to must be an exact match. And this is something the RS must enforce. It's just the matching is a bit complex because sometimes it's a reference, sometimes it's the direct value. But we have specified that in a clear way, I think, now in the draft. Another point is about the ACE request creation hints when the ad hoc reverse message flow is supported. So we have now limited the usage of that. And why did we do that? Well, because the identity protection that is achieved through ad hoc can actually be weakened or defeated if the RS exposes certain information, such as audience and scope, in this unprotected ACE request creation hints message. So what we said is basically that if an RS supports the ad hoc reverse message flow and is sending the AS request creation hints, it must not include the audience parameter, and it should not include the scope parameter unless it's certain that its value can contribute to exposing the identity of the RS. And this is kind of, again, in the interest of maintaining the identity protection that ad hoc provides and not weakening that just because you're using this profile. Another point that we did was we moved actually a lot of parameters from the profiles document to this draft because they were kind of they just fit better in this draft because they were ad hoc specific parameters, and this comes back to those parameters so showed earlier in the ad hoc information object. And we also added one new parameter, trust anchors, which can be used to indicate trust anchors for different purposes. For now, there's only a single purpose, which is validation of ad hoc credentials, but this is actually extensible, so you can actually register new types of trust anchors. And this was also relevant for other documents that are ongoing, like this trust anchor hints document that some other people are working on. So this is kind of overtaking some of that functionality. Yeah, access token request response message must be encoded in CBOR, no JSON, in the interest of simplification. We revised some examples. We also clarified which confirmation methods are allowed. So for instance, KCCS is not allowed since ad hoc doesn't admit use of naked COSI keys as authentication credentials. So it doesn't make sense to use in this profile. We also specified like how should the ad hoc info content be interpreted for group audiences. So the idea here is that if the token is issued for a group audience, the information in this ad hoc info is referring to the group audience as a whole. And because of that, it's appropriate for the AS to define group audiences that comprise resource servers that are aligned in terms of their supported ad hoc features and configurations. So put it in other words, since this object refers to the whole group, you better make sure that the whole group shares, a same set of ad hoc configuration. So it's not like one RS is using a certain method and other is using a different method. They need to be aligned since this ad hoc object covers all members of the group. Next steps, or at least a selection of next steps. We wanted to look into early allocation of code points for CWT confirmation methods. Maybe good to have early registration of these. There was discussion to actually introduce an ad hoc ED item for conveying ACE request creation hints. And this is good because you can have protected and authenticated information acting as request creation hints. And it also allows the client to learn this information during its ad hoc execution with the RS. And in fact, if it then learns that information, it can actually go to the RS to request the access token during this first execution of ad hoc with the RS. It can get the access token, and by the time it's sending ad hoc message 3, it has the access token to actually include in the item in ad hoc message 3. We want to define how to do proof of possession of the client's private key at AES. We already have a solution defined in the group of score ACE profile. We can more or less apply that with some modifications. Yeah, and then last point, we wanted to compare and kind of elaborate a bit more on security and privacy properties of which ad hoc message you're including the access token in. All right, thank you. That was this profile.
All right, thank you. And if there are no questions on this one, we'll move to the group profile. And thank you to all the speakers for doing such an excellent job on staying on time. Here you go. I'll fix the clicker.
Yes, thank you. So this is now going over to the group of score profile of ACE. So again, what is this about? Well, it's enabling access control for accessing resources at group members. So in this case, you use group of score as a security protocol between the client and the resource servers. And the key point here is that the joining of the group happens first, and that process is defined in a completely separate document. What are some properties of this solution? Well, you achieve proof of possession of the client's private key. The RS can actually achieve proof of group membership for the client because the RS wants to know that, okay, this client is actually member of the group, the same group that IS and RS is a member of. You also have mutual authentication when you are completing a first group of score exchange through the to the properties of group of score. And again, this is like to allow fine-grained access control within a group. So it's not just because you're a member of the group, you have access to all servers and all resources in the group. You may still want fine-grained access control, and that's where this profile comes in. So what did we do in version 4? One point we did was clarifications on the content of CNF and rec CNF. So it may be the case that the client uploaded its authentication credential to the group manager as part of a chain or a bag. And in this case, we want to make sure that the inner value of the rec CNF parameter in the access token request specifies the client's authentication credentials in this exact same chain or bag. And again, this same value will then be used in the CNF claim of the access token. And this is something the RS must confirm and verify that when it gets the credential of the client from the group manager, it wants to see that if it's part of a chain or a bag, that exact chain or bag is what was in the CNF claim in the access token. And this is really for consistency checking. We improved some guidelines for when you want to use different profiles. So for instance, a client may want to use the group of score profile and the OSCOR profile at the same time with the same RS. So how would it do that? Well, one proposal we have in this draft is that basically you associate audiences with specific profiles. So the RS can be registered at the AS with multiple audiences, and each audience will actually imply a specific usage of a specific profile, and that's the way the client can then indicate to the AS which profile it wants to use. So it can get an access token for each profile by specifying different audiences. However, now there's this work in workflow and params to extend the semantics of the ACE profile parameter, which we can probably take advantage of. And the idea there would be that basically the client can use the ACE profile parameter in the access token request to explicitly indicate which ACE profile it wants to use and get a token for. So probably this approach will complement or will more likely replace the above point. Yeah, this was an extended discussion we had at IETF in Dublin about proof of possession of the client's credential at the AS. And basically the point here is that enforcing the client to always include proof of possession evidence in every access token request is too restrictive. And why is that? Well, because the AS may have other means of performing proof of possession or may have done so already, like via a trusted third party or through this secure channel that is established with the client. So how did we solve this in practice? Basically, when the AS successfully verifies the proof of possession evidence for a client, it will mark that client's credential as confirmed. Now, if the AS has performed proof of possession through some other means, through a trusted third party, or however it wishes to do it, it can also then mark the client's credential as confirmed. And now, if the client does not include a POP evidence and its credential is already marked as confirmed, well, it's already been, the AS has already done proof of possession for that credential, thus there's no need for the client to include the POP evidence, and the request for an access token is valid. On the other hand, if the client does not include POP evidence and the credential is not confirmed, well, then obviously the request is invalid. We did some updates to the IANA considerations and also some general like editorial improvements and fixes, aligning terminology. We also aligned some values for CBER abbreviations. So for instance, specifying that the value 11 for KCCS consistent with the EDOCO score profile. So what are we planning as next steps? We want to add some considerations about group rekeying. For instance, group rekeying may happen in Grupo score between the time of an access token request and the upload of the access token. And this will actually change group identifiers in the group. So we want to explore a bit how this would work and how you could, just to ensure that things still work if a group rekeying happens to occur. We also want to enable dynamic update of access rights. We have a kind of a skeleton structure in section 331, and these can rely on some new parameters that are defined in the workflow and params document. We also wanted to explore a bit setups where you have multiple application groups and security groups, because a client might need an access token that actually spans multiple application or security groups. And now currently the access token can only target one security group. So to enable this, we may need to make some of the existing parameters multi-value. For instance, if the client has different credential in different security groups, or if the client has, like the actual security groups have different ID context or group identifier, which they would very likely have. And then we have some other pending points. Yeah, I see. That's it. And I see a comment from, or a hands up from Christian.
Yeah, just brief question. Are there good use cases known?
Sorry, I cannot hear you. You're very, very low. Yeah, I can't hear your voice. Yeah.
Are there known use cases for those multiple security groups? Because that sounds like a very complex thing that is very easy to get wrong when the cost is just getting another token for what is already a different group.
This is something we want to explore. It's not a guarantee we'll actually put this in the draft if it becomes too complex. But the use case would basically be what we're stating here, that the client wants to limit itself to a single token. So in that sense, it's more of an optimization thing. If you can have a single token rather than multiple access tokens. But I agree, like if it looks like it becomes overly complex, this is something we may choose to not include. For now, it's more like an exploration. Right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you
for listening.
So the last one we have is the PubSub profile.
So hi, my name is Francesca Palombini, and I'm finally back behind this microphone. So, just a very, very quick presentation on the PubSub profile. status update. The core COAP pub subdocument is progressing well. It's almost done in the working group. I believe the working group last call ended a couple of days ago. ACE key group has been published in September 2024. That was a normative reference for the ACE profile, and the authors are discussing an update of the ACE pub sub that should be published shortly, but it's mainly minor changes, except this one issue I want to talk about. So the main issue is this. Currently, there is MQTT specified in this profile. It's a pub sub profile, and it mentions both COAP and MQTT. But the MQTT specifications are not at the same detail level as the COAP. And as SIGDEM has stated in the mailing list, as you can see at that link, we say in the draft, MQTT clients need to use COAP to communicate with the KDC. So maybe it's not realistic to have a client support both COAP and MQTT. And we authors were discussing, and we came to the agreement that maybe we should remove MQTT from the document, and this draft IETF ACE pub sub should become draft IETF ACE COAP pub sub. So only focus on COAP, remove MQTT. So SIGDEM posted this proposal in the mailing list 3 weeks ago, and there was no objections to that. So I just wanted to check that there is no objections from the working group, because this is a working group document. Before we make any major changes, we should check. So any objections?
This is Matthias Kovac. Sorry, I have to reload this broken
Go ahead.
for the queue. I just have a question for understanding. So when I asked why this profile specifically for PubSub is used, and that cannot be treated just like a COAP client accessing a COAP resource and so on, where we already have the building blocks, I got the answer is that it's broader, that it also covers MQTT. Now I hear that MQTT is removed, and I'm back at my question. What is the specific thing here that cannot be solved by the building blocks for a normal COAP client subscribing, for instance, to a COAP
Okay,
resource?
so this is longer conversation than the 5 minutes we have today.
Okay.
But there is more to it than just a simple profile of ACE between client and server. There is a security between publication. The publications are protected. There is like keys being exchanged so that the publications are protected. That's mainly what this adds to the existing like profile and the existing client server communication, COAP communication. But I suggest you go read the document and tell me if it doesn't make sense or you don't see the motivation for it. Let's have a discussion about it. It's still in like developing phase. So
Okay, thank you.
yeah. So yeah, ideally we wanted to support MQTT, but because the communications with the key manager are done through COAP, then sort of like, yeah. And when we reviewed it, we realized like MQTT is not well specified enough. It's not gonna, it would need much more work. So maybe we split that out or we do it somewhere else. Any more comments? No? Okay, so given that, if there is no objection, so we would move MQTT out. And we also suggest to rename the document from PubSub profile for ACE to COAP PubSub profile of ACE. Or, and the second is obviously not my preferred option because it's gonna take me 3 minutes to read. Key management and end-to-end message protection for the PubSub architecture for the constrained application protocol using Authentication and Authorization for constrained environments, ACE. So this is a combination of the titles from, it's aligned with, the reason for this second option is because it's aligned with the ACE key group almost core and the core COAP PubSub. So I obviously have a preference for the first one because it's shorter. So I will ask for objections to go for the first one, and if there is strong preferences. And if not, I think that's it for me. So I got that we will do this modification. We remove MQTT and we change the title and submit as a new document.
You'll confirm this on the list, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's already been posted to the list, but sure, we can repost it to the list and wait a couple of weeks, of course.
Yep. Thank you very much. That will give the people who were not able to attend a chance to see it and respond. So that was our last presentation. So thank you everyone for attending. And I will hopefully be able to be there in person for the next meeting.
Yes, and thanks to Paul for being on site.
Yes, thank you very much to Paul for helping us out since neither of us was able to attend.
It was a great job handing the clicker to 4 people here.
Yes. All right. Have fun.